Holy Week. It's almost upon us, and it kicks off this coming Sunday with the 109th edition of the men's Tour of Flanders and the 22nd of the women's.
Long, tactical, technical and downright brutal. This race, for every Belgian cycling fan and many beyond, is the highlight of the season.
Coming up, the route, the riders, the weather, the scenarios that could play out, and the all-important prediction fails.
Let's start with a brief recap of last year. Mathieu van der Poel equalled the record of 3 wins in the men's race by soloing away from his rivals on the Koppenberg with 44 Ks to go. It might be slightly unfair to point out, but Pogacar wasn't there last year, and that won't be the case this Sunday.
Ominous. In the women's, Lidl Trek couldn't have had a better day, really. They got 2 riders in the winning move of 3, with Elisa Longo Borghini taking her second win at the race 9 years after her first. She outsprinted Kasia Niewiadoma with teammate Shirin van Androoy in 3rd.
Not a good day for SD Works then, by their standards. Right, before we discuss the ins and outs of who's riding and who has a chance of winning this year, let's take a look at the routes.
So this year, the men's race is 269 kilometres long, with 2,200 metres of elevation gain. Along the way, 16 Hellingen, or short, sharp climbs, 12 of which are cobbled, plus a further 7 flat cobbled sectors. This year, actually, the start moves back to Bruges, right up on the extreme northwestern coast of Belgium, but it's going to alternate each year from now on between Bruges and Antwerp, or at least for the foreseeable future.
In terms of parcours, it doesn't make too much of a difference where they start from, as either way the race is flat for the first 125 kilometres, with only 350 metres of elevation gain in that time.
That is flat, isn't it? But it's normally during that time that the breakaway forms. Exactly when that happens, though, is anybody's guess. Some years it goes early, some years they're very close to the climbs before anybody gets away.
The first flat section of cobbles comes after 109 kilometres. That's at dawn, 1.6 k's long, and really just a small taste of what's to come, so don't expect too much action there.
Soon after, though, they'll pass through Oudenaarde, where the race will finish around 3.5 hours later. Next, though, they head down the N8.
The N8.
The N8, which under normal circumstances is one of the most inconsequential roads that you can possibly imagine, because it's straight, it's quite wide. However, it's here that the first fight for position really starts.
Yeah, isn't that where Filip Magichuk took out half the peloton a couple of years ago?
Yeah, that is the exact place. Yeah. And yes, the reason he was so desperate to move up and why others will be fighting again this year in the same place is because that road leads into Berkham, not particularly famous. But just after that, it's onto the first true difficulty of the day, the Oude Quaremont. That one in total, 2.5 Ks, 3.6%, but most of the serious climbing comes in the middle of that climb.
Yeah, Pogacar holds the Strava segment there, averaging 33.6 kilometres per hour, the second time he went up it in 2023. And that was the first time he dropped everyone, but he decided to wait for them and then drop them the third time up.
Although he was slightly slower in his ascent the third time up by 12 seconds, but I guess you can forgive him that because it came after 250 Ks of racing. Anyway, it's a climb they'll take on 3 times in total on the day. Personally, I don't think the favourites should take too many risks ahead of the first ascent there, because over the top, they're on big main roads for another 10 Ks or so before they turn right and head towards the Akenberg, which has been reintroduced to the race this year.
Yeah, it's also cobbles. But yeah, this one is 1.2 kilometres at 6.1%. There's a brief bit of respite before they then get onto the tarmacked Wolvenberg climb, but that leads straight onto the Holleweg stretch of flat cobbles.
Which in turn leads onto the Karel Martelstraat and then the Jagerij. So 2 climbs and 3 sections of pave, or kasseien as they're known locally, in the space of just 8k.
Yeah, hands up if you're lost already. No, there's no rest for the wicked though, and anyone who is caught out of position there needs to get shifty on, because they've only got 5 kilometres between there and the Molenberg, which is a climb that you need to be at the front for.
Why? Because the entrance to the Molenberg is A, ridiculously narrow, and B, on a bend. No. Plus the gradients ramp up to 16% after about 100 metres of it. So if you're in 100th position going into the Molenberg, chances are you're going to have to unclip because of the traffic jam that will form in front of you.
Oh, Pedersen and Jorgensen lit it up on that climb last year, didn't they? With Mathieu van der Poel in close attendance. It comes 10 kilometres earlier this year, and there is a slightly different route over the top.
Correct, yeah. So instead of heading right at the top, they go straight and head towards the Paderstraat, the 5th sector of flat cobbles, And also the longest one, actually, at 2.3 kilometres.
Yeah, it's slightly uphill, that one, towards the end, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It does get tough towards the end.
Does get tough.
And there's also a smooth piece on the side of the road then, the right-hand side, but it's only about 10 centimetres wide, so it's not particularly easy to ride on.
That is next level nerd knowledge for Tour of Flanders. Now, they've got another mini break after that. A mini break, not a mini break, as they head towards the Berendries, which comes exactly where it did last year with 91 k's to go. That's one of the steepest climbs on the route, but it is smooth, isn't it? It's on tarmac.
I've got a great little factoid about the Berendries.
Go on then.
So Pogacar and I have the same personal best time on Strava on that climb.
Have you really?
Yep. 2 minutes, 15 seconds.
And where does that put you on the leaderboard?
It puts us equal 1,565th, unfortunately. You're actually 62nd on that segment, still about half a minute quicker than both of us.
I mean, I will
Legends.
take that. I can't believe it's that low these days. Clearly.
Yeah, you were top.
I had the KOM for a time.
Oh, you did, didn't you?
I had the KOM, yeah.
I've forgotten about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, from that point on, the route is exactly the same as last year's race. The sixth climb is the Valkenburg, which is also smooth. Then there's a feed zone, then Berg ten Outer. Not quite the Koppenberg, but still has a max gradient of 21%. Mads Pedersen was away with Jenny Vermeers last year in a move that he later admitted completely killed his chances of winning the race.
Nevertheless, this is a point of the race where riders try to anticipate and get ahead of the game, don't they? So watch out for that. The Nieuwe Kruisberg comes next, which is the bigger tarmac road out of Ronse. Then the second ascent of the Kwaremont looms. Now, it comes after 214 kilometres of racing with 54 to go.
And this is where things, shall I say, get really serious, isn't it? Because after that, it's a quick descent down to the first ascent of the Paterberg, which gets up to and over 20%. It's only about a 1 minute effort, that one, but it is made harder by the slow right-hander that brings you into it.
Yeah, and the cobbles as well.
Yeah.
After that, they take the same slightly wider roads towards the Koppenberg that they did last year in an effort to try and make things a little bit safer.
And then what can you say about the Koppenberg, really? I think we said last year that one of the things that makes it so special is it's only used in 2 road races per year. And that's the 2 that we're talking about today, men's and women's Flanders.
Yeah, so 22% at its steepest, and even the pros sometimes struggle to ride all the way up, don't they? Last year was a case in point because it was wet, and so only a handful of riders made it up without walking. You don't really need much more evidence than that, do you, as to how hard a climb is?
Not really, no. It's also where Van der Poel went clear last year, as I pointed out earlier, never to be seen again. A few flatter stretches of cobblestones follow, with Maria Borrestraat, Steenbeek-Dries and Stationsberg. But then the steep cobbled climbs continue with the Tynberg.
Which is actually nicknamed the Boonenberg, isn't it? After all the attacks Tom Boonen made on it during his career. And there's even a statue of him at the top.
Kind of, yeah, there's a statue of his legs at the top, but yes, there is one. After that...
There's one of yours as well, but you can barely see it.
Yeah, looked like a couple of twigs from trees. After that, they're on to do the Krausberg, which is the cobble climb out of Ronse, as opposed to the tarmac one that I talked about earlier. And then finally, they repeat that double punch, the Kwaremont and Paterberg, for the final time.
Yeah, it's 13.2 k's from the top to the finish on the outskirts of Oudenaarde, all on big, wide roads. For the last 2 years, we've had solo winners in the men's race, but the year before, you might remember that we had that 2-up sprint between Mathieu van der Poel and Tadej Pogacar.
That's the one we keep saying, that Pogacar finished 4th in a 2-up sprint that year, wasn't it?
That's the one,
yes. Yeah. OK, on to the women's route, which this year is 171 kilometres with 1,500 metres of climbing. They start in Oudenaarde and tackle a flat loop that includes that same cobbled sector in Dawn.
Yeah, they've got a different climb to start with, haven't they? The Edelaarberg, which is a tarmac climb out of Oudenaarde, and then they're on to the Wolvenberg. So from there, they take a similar route to the men's with the Molenberg, Paderstraat, Berendries, Valkenburg, and so on. But then they skirt around to the Eichenberg, and then the Koppenberg looms large.
They too actually end up on the old N8,
the N8
roadside. But rather than go all the way down to the foot of the Kwaremont, they take an earlier left turn and hit the Koppenberg. Comes a little later in their race this year, 123 instead of 118 k's. But we normally see quite a large bunch come into that climb.
Yeah, which makes the brutal climb even harder, doesn't it? From that point on, their route is exactly the same as the men's, finishing over the Kwaremont and the Paterberg before that run into Oudenaarde for the finish.
So in summary then, 2 incredibly difficult races. And to triumph, you need to be able to climb, position yourself, handle your bike, be aware of what's going on around you, and sometimes sprint at the finish. only complete bike riders can win the Tour of Flanders.
Yeah, now just before we move on to the favourites, we wanted to showcase a couple of very special t-shirts that we've had designed for this part of the season. And they are available over at shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com.
I believe we also put a QR code in, but last time I mentioned that on the GCN show, I pointed the wrong way. I'm going to go there, which means the editor will put it there. If you scan that anyway, it will take you directly to those products. There's a whole load of other GCN merch there as well, so if these don't take your fancy, I don't see why they wouldn't, that will help us out too, because anything you purchase helps to fund the free-to-view videos that we make here at GCN.
Does indeed. Shall we get on to the favourites?
I think we might as well.
Two riders stand out from all the others in the men's race. Mathieu van der Poel and Tadej Pogacar. Now, between them, they have won 4 of the last 5 editions. Van der Poel has 3 of those, but then Pogacar has only ridden this race twice.
And he wasn't too shabby either time that he competed here, was he? No. It's amazing that just 4 years ago, I was thinking this earlier, we couldn't have imagined a Grand Tour winner really even competing at the Ronde, let alone winning it.
No.
Anyway, if either of them do win it, they'll put themselves in front in terms of monument wins, because currently they both sit on 7.
Ooh. That's a good stat, isn't it? Now, if Mathieu van der Poel wins it, he will go into the history books as well as the only rider ever to have won the race 4 times.
And his record here is quite incredible. So he started this race 6 times. He's never finished lower than 4th at the Tour of Flanders. And in a race where bad luck can really play its part quite often, that's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, his 4th place at the first time of trying did come after some bad luck as well, didn't it? Now, anyway, it would be a big surprise if one of them didn't win, wouldn't it?
I'd say so, yeah.
Particularly as they have both got strong teams.
Yeah, so in terms of support, I don't think Pogacar's got much to worry about. His teammates Pollitt, Bial and Morgado finished 3rd, 4th and 5th respectively last year, whilst Wellens was just outside the top 10 himself. And if you consider that Narvaez and Vermeers have been added to their roster for 2025, I reckon they'll be more than capable of keeping Poggy safe to the first climb of the day so he can go for that solo 120k win to the line. I am joking, of course. But whilst they haven't got any really big standout results in the tougher cobbled semi-classics this year so far without Pogacar, I do think that they will do a good job for him this coming Sunday.
I agree. Van der Poel, meanwhile, has Gianni Vermeers, who seems to get stronger and stronger, doesn't he? Whilst also being incredibly shrewd.
He is clever, yeah.
And an amazing bike handler, we should say. Dillier, who is the workhorse, and then the likes of Groves, Rickard and Maurice, who are all solid, aren't they?
The thing is, I think they can put most of the responsibility of controlling on Sunday and pacing to UAE, I would say, because they know that Pogacar is going to attack them. He's got to get away. So it makes sense to save as many of your own riders as possible.
Is there a risk they're going to play poker?
That doesn't happen much in the modern era, does it?
Not really, but I don't know. Yeah, maybe then. I guess they do. Outside of the big 2, there are a whole host of riders looking to cause an upset, and they could do it. Van Aert, we should say, has to top that list for the 2nd year in a row. He skipped Milan-San Remo to concentrate on these races. The problem is he has the weight of a nation on his shoulders, and something seems to miss at the minute.
Does feel like that, doesn't it? I guess going back to the first point, that weight of the nation does seem to get heavier and heavier year on year, doesn't it? Because Belgian fans really feel like he's not fulfilled his potential at either Flanders or in Roubaix.
And then Belgians.
No, that is true. But the pressure over there is even greater.
Yeah.
And then Visma just aren't as strong as they used to be because, well, Laporte is out, Van Hooijdonk was forced into retirement with a heart problem, and Van Baal, he keeps crashing, basically.
He does, yeah.
Again, that might not be too much of a disadvantage because of that, they won't be looked at to control things this year.
No, I don't think there are many people who wouldn't love to see Van Aert finally take a cobbled monument as well. But given what we've seen of Van Aert so far, I'm also expecting them to try and play the numbers game a little bit. You've mentioned the riders that they don't have, but they do have Jorgensen, who never seems to have a bad day, and then Benoot, Hagenes and Affini. They're all super strong on their day, aren't they?
Yeah, they're all solid riders. I'm also wondering whether they're considering bringing Matt Brennan along. Like, he's been the revelation of the early part of the season. I know he's only 19, right, but the wins he's had are incredible. And I think he's more than capable of doing a great job based on what I've seen the last few weeks. He also was pulled out of Catalonia.
Well, he was, yeah, for a rest.
To give him some extra. They didn't say what he was resting extra for, though.
Oh, I see. Well, they said that he was going to do Romandy, wasn't it?
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Well, I take that all back.
I mean, it'd be cool.
Yeah. I think it's a long shot, but I'd like to see him there.
Well, yeah, why not? Now, by this time the video comes out, Tour of Flanders will have been completed. Pogacar and Mathieu van der Poel aren't there, but Van Aert is. So maybe, hopefully, there will be more reason to think that Van Aert, after that, can do the honours.
I hope so too.
Right then, fourth favourite, despite everything he's done recently, is Mads Pedersen at 20-1. It's already 7 years ago that he finished second on his debut at the race, believe it or not. That is a long time ago, isn't it? Since then, he's had one further podium and an 8th place.
I think he just needs to be a little more clever, personally, this year. He wasted so much energy at a pointless moment last year, we said earlier. He's clearly mega strong, especially right now with his recent results at E3 and Wevelgem. We know he can also sprint. I think he should just believe in himself, but also use his power in the right way.
He will be aware that it's likely how he won't be able to keep up, will he? I don't think, when Pogacar and Van der Poel put the hammer down. So what would you say? He's got like a 50% chance of staying in touch?
At most, when those two go for it, again, based on what happened at E3.
Yeah, so you can understand why he wants to get a head start, even if the trouble with the head start is that then when you get caught, you know.
Well, yeah, there is that. I think it's better that way round, though, to put yourself in with a chance.
Yeah,
He's in a difficult situation now, though, because, yes, he needs to get ahead of the game, but other teams are going to try and stop him getting ahead of the game because of how well he's currently going.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Lidl Trek are definitely strong, though. Probably the strongest overall team of the Classic so far. They've got Sturven, Milan, Kirsch and Schoenge, but also Matthias Vacek. I mean, he was incredible at Omloop back in February.
He was a bit of a beast, isn't he? Is Thibaut Nace riding? Do we know?
Good point. No, I think he's concentrating on the Ardennes. I seem to remember reading a month or so ago. So at the moment, it looks like the last two riders are going to be De Klerk and Ole, both of which have big engines.
Yes, very big engines. There will be no Tom Pidcock this year, for the same reason as Nace, I assume. So the next favourite is Filippo Ganna of Ineos.
This race actually wasn't on his original programme, but after performing so well at E3 last Friday, we understand they removed Gent Wevelgem from his schedule and put him in the Tour of Flanders instead.
A podium finish would be a great result.
It would be,
for them, wouldn't it? They've also got Sheffield, who's looking good, Tarling, Connor Swift, Bob Youngles, and you'd imagine Ben Turner as well, given his efforts at E3, although he's not on the provisional start list. Next up, Stefan Kung.
Do you know he's the local legend on the Quaremont at the moment?
Really?
Having ridden it 10 times over the last 90 days.
No way.
He must know that climb pretty well at this point.
I mean, unfortunately, it doesn't matter how well he knows it, does it really? Because he always seems to be the nearly man.
Yes.
I was gutted when he got caught at Omloop back in February.
Exactly the same, yes. Valentin Madouas is also worth watching for that same team of Groupama. He's been very good here in the past. Arnaud Delis, incidentally, is next on the bookies list of favourites, but he's actually not racing this Tour of Flanders anymore. I hope for him, and for Lotto actually, that he does get back to his best later this year, but there's clearly an issue, and that's why he's being rested.
Yeah, so keep your eyes out, though, for some very special bikes and kit from the Lotto team on Sunday, by the way. Matej Mohoric is next. He's not had the start to the season that he'd have hoped for, partly due to illness before Strade Bianche, but he is part of a solid Bahrain victorious team that includes Fred Wright as well.
Michael Matthews is Mr. Dependable, if I can get my words out, isn't he? He finished, fourth at Milan San Remo just a couple of weeks ago. He got relegated actually last year at this race, having crossed the line in third.
Oh, yeah.
So he'll be back for vengeance, I would say. Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe look like a team to be reckoned with to some extent. Don't have a standout favourite, but with Pithi, Lascano and the Van Dijk twins, they could pull something off under the right circumstances.
Especially if things get tactical. Although, as you said, that doesn't seem to happen very much these days. But you're right, it is a solid team.
Yeah, I'd say so. Nilson Paulus is back in the Tour of Flanders for the second time in his career. He finished fifth on debut in 2023. Alberto Bestia, who won here in 2019, is here for Astana this year, so he'll help to pick up a load of UCI points. That'll be their aim. Anyone we've missed, would you say?
Alaphilippe.
Oh, yes. Yeah, actually, He's focusing on Flanders specifically this year, isn't he? You might remember he made the winning move in 2020, only to crash into a police motorbike or outrider. Really nasty crash as well, wasn't it? Trenton and Haller will be alongside him, and Tudor Pro Cycling, actually, as a whole team, have been brilliant so far this year.
Yeah, I'd be surprised to see him up there, though, I've got to say.
Yeah.
No matter how much he's focusing on it. Do you know what his odds are?
Well, last week I looked, he was 200 to 1, but I've just seen that he's now 300 to 1.
Great.
Even though he hasn't raced.
Things looking positive for Alaphilippe then.
And then 300 to 1 is also what Alexander Kristoff of Uno X is.
If I was going to take a punt, it would be on Kristoff over Alaphilippe.
Would it?
Wouldn't you? I mean, 300 to 1, I wouldn't expect it to come good, but still.
Well, I'll just put a couple of quid on both.
Yeah, good point. Now, this will be Kristoff's 14th start at the race, won't it? So he's finished all 13 that he's done so far, which is an achievement in itself, really. And the 7 times at which he's been in the top 5, including, of course, 1 win in 2015. He's getting on a bit, though, isn't he?
He is getting on a little bit. And the way that the race is raced, I would say, has changed in the last few years. He's undoubtedly strong, but I don't see him on the podium unless there are some very extraordinary circumstances.
No, 300 to 1. Kind of extraordinary circumstances. Soren Varenshold, winner of Omloop, and Jonas Abrahamsen. They'll be with Uno X as well, though. Give them a bit of support. / running themselves.
And unfortunately, Soudal Quickstep aren't really the team they used to be in these races that they dominated for many years. Yves Lampard has been decent here in the past, but looking at their team, I don't see anyone that can finish on the podium, if I'm completely honest. I think Casper Pedersen might be their best bet based on what we've seen so far this year.
Yeah, what about Biniam Girmay of Intermarché?
Again, doesn't seem to have pushed on from where he was, 3 years ago when he won Wevelgem, was up there in a lot of the classics on the cobbles. Intermarché also have Lawrence Rex, so he's another rider to watch. Meanwhile, John Degenkolb leads Picnic Post NL, but you'd imagine that he is probably more focused on Roubaix.
Yeah, Dries de Bont and Oliver Naesen will lead Decathlon Agé Desert, whilst Ivan Garcia Cortina will hope to surprise for Movistar, won't he?
OK, on to the women's then. Let's start with SD Works. Seemed like the
Might as well.
Doesn't it? They had a race to forget last year. Vollering and Kopecky way out of position on the Koppenberg, and neither really got back into the race, whilst Vibes was good on the Koppenberg, but then faded later. Yeah,
now Vollering has obviously moved on, but Kopecky will start as the favourite, won't she, for that team? She's raced twice so far this year, but both times has ended up working for Vibes, very successfully as well, I should say. So again, she will have raced twice Tour of Flanders, and by the time you watch this, which will give us another data point.
Yeah, it will. She's not the only former winner of the race on that team, though. Anna van der Breggen has just been confirmed as starting. She won this race 7 years ago and had 5 other top 10 results, so she knows the roads quite well.
She does, yeah. When you add in Blanca Vass, Misha Bredewald and Marta Lack, you've got to say that's the team to beat, haven't you, basically?
I would say so, yes, especially as Vollering isn't riding this year. She's chosen to concentrate fully on the Ardennes races, which is understandable, albeit a shame for this race and for us as fans.
A big shame, actually. Lidl Trek field a great team, but Elisa Balsamo is another rider who's decided to skip it. So Brand, Dijknen, Van Anrooy, Van Dijk, Hansen and Henderson are on their provisional team list, aren't they? So Van Anrooy is still finding her legs after some time off due to an operation over the winter, but hopefully she will be close to her best.
I must admit, though, when you just read out that list of names on their provisional team, it was difficult to see them beating SD Works like they did last year.
They are really going to miss Elisa Longo Borghini, who's now with UAE, we should say. She's mega strong this season already, but again, Wevelgem wasn't really raced hard enough for her to show this year, was she? But she's definitely someone who I can see putting SD Works into difficulty if she can find the right scenario. Looking at her team, it should be that all of them are working for her. Svinkels will be a particularly useful teammate to have, but Persico and Gasparini are good too. Puk Pieterse next.
This race should really suit her, I'd say, with her bike handling skills and the types of climbs that are on offer. I'm expecting big things from Puk Pieterse this Sunday.
Nui Doma and Ludwig lead Canstram Zonda Crypto, but I've got a feeling that both of them will be racing on Sunday with an eye already on the Ardennes Classics, which do suit them better. Whilst in the absence of Vollering, FDJ will count on Chabet, won't they? And maybe Ali Wollaston too.
Liana Lippert and new recruit Marlon Reusser will lead Movistar, whilst...
No count Ferguson?
Again, not on the provisional start list, I don't think so. Maybe they've decided she is still too young to be thrown in at the deep end in Flanders. She did also crash at Ghent-Wevelgem last Sunday, but you never know.
No, OK.
Next up, Bisma Lisa Bike, Marianne Vos and Pauline Ferrand-Prévot.
Wow, that's a double act, isn't it? Now, it wasn't seamless at Milan-San Remo, but Vos did get second, so not bad. And I think, actually, she's the one rider that Vibes might be worried about if it comes down to a group sprint of any sorts.
Yeah, you always have to worry about Voss. I mean, she certainly won't be putting her arms up in the air 100 metres before the line like she did in Amstel last year, will she, Phoebes? Imogen Wolf is another dark horse. She'll probably be on a helper role at Visma, but she's already been mixing it up with the best in the pro ranks this year, despite turning 19 last week.
Marta Cavalli and Pfeiffer Georgie are both worth watching for Picnic Post NL. My outside bet, though, is Naomi Rugg of EF.
That's a good shout.
Thank you very much. I know. Her last 4 races have all been one-day races, and she's not finished outside the top 9. Plus, she won the Tour Down Under.
Yeah, and she finished on the podium course of Milano San Remo, so she clearly has a fast finish too. She's done this race twice before, though, Si, and not finished it yet.
Well, she's not the same rider this year, is she? She's gone up a level or 2.
Yeah, I'm joking. You are right. They've also got Sarah Roy and Alison Jackson at EF2, Paternoster and Rosamund Gandy, Liverlula, and just finally, Kimberly LaCour leads AG Insurance. She's been so consistent this season, so watch out for her as well.
Yeah, she's visible enough, isn't she? With the Mauritian National Champs kit, which looks quite similar to the Rainbow Bands. In fact, so similar that I'm surprised the UCI have allowed it.
I always think that as well.
Well, they must have allowed it because, anyway, there we go.
Make the rules up, don't they? Right, just before we make our awful predictions, weather watch. There's a bit of a heat wave arriving in Northern Europe.
Well, it's already here, mate, isn't it?
For Belgium and here in the UK, it gets up to 19 degrees on Friday.
Oh my goodness me! Sunbathing in Speedos, that's what I'll be doing.
Exactly. But it does cool down on Sunday.
Oh.
13 degrees at the race, but only 4 degrees when they set out from Bruges, 10 degrees when the women set off in Alnada.
Yeah, don't forget your gloves. But it's still sunny though, right?
Still sunny, yeah, with a light to medium easterly wind, which will make it a headwind for those last flat 10Ks back into Alnada.
Ooh, that's a useful bit of knowledge, isn't it? Good for the chasers.
Exactly, yeah, it should be good for the chasers. And that could genuinely make a difference to the outcome of both races, I would say, if that forecast is correct, of course.
Yeah. And if there's actually any chase left in the chasers by that point.
Yeah, but it just helps because A, you feel closer because you are actually closer by distance, maybe not in duration. And B, when you're in a chase group, obviously you get like longer sat in doing lower power.
Yeah, but by that point, everyone's so ruined, aren't they? Because that's what I always think when I'm like, why don't they just catch them? And then you're like, oh no, because they're absolutely ruined. I don't know. We'll see, eh? We'll see.
Yeah, sofa punditry is always a lot easier than bike riding itself, isn't it? Right, should we go into predictions?
Yeah, so I was just thinking some of the commentary I was listening to at the weekend. There's some serious, like, what? Why aren't they just chasing them back? Why are they not chasing them back?
Yeah.
Oh, well, there we go. Right, predictions. Presumably there are only 2 options for the men's. Aren't there?
There's 2 obvious options. Yeah, we don't want to risk it.
Go on, you go first.
Alaphilippe and Christoph, you talking about? I can go first, can I?
Why not, mate?
Thank you very much. I just feel like Van der Poel is better than ever, physically, mentally, tactically.
Yeah.
And at that headwind finish, well, that's got me convinced that he's going to break the record for Flanders wins this Sunday.
I hope he does, but I do think Pogacar will annihilate him. No, maybe not annihilate, but I think it'd be a good race, wouldn't it? In the women's, I'm going for Kopecky. Me first this time.
Okay, you just picked the riders with the lowest odds at the bookmakers, haven't you, Si?
I'm learning. Also, they know what they're doing, right?
Bookmakers?
Yeah, and that's why they make billions.
Very true, good point, well made. All right, I will then go for Puck Peterson of Phoenix to Koenig. Heart pick, I would say, although I generally do think she's got what it takes to win.
I think so, yeah.
Thanks for watching the preview, everybody. See you next week for the Roubaix one.